Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the series that Rajkumari Neogia and I, Sarah Payton, are doing on bringing a sense of warmth for the self into the workplace. A radical concept, Rajkumari. How are you today?
I'm fantastic, Sarah. How are you?
I'm also very well. I'm very excited about our topic today, about understanding the way that reactivity and alarm live in our bodies.
That is very curious to me. Please, dive right in.
Okay. So, everybody has this huge bundle of nerves that's running down in front of the spinal column that nobody knows about because it's really safe. It doesn't get severed in accidents. It just keeps plugging away and working. And it's the bundle of nerves that connects our face and our eyes and our ears and our brain and our voice and our lungs and our viscera and our intestines. And it's like the highway of information that's running between our body and our brain, and it is called the vagus nerve. There is a gentleman named Stephen Porges who has created a body of knowledge called polyvagal theory, which means that he has developed an entire body of work that speculates and has now been proven by many, many research projects to show that our emotions travel and inform our sense of being safe and belonging and mattering in the world, and that it happens not just on a brain level, but we are in a constant state of receiving the world viscerally. We're receiving whether or not we matter and whether or not we belong, not just with our brains, but also with our bodies. The vagus nerve has three ways that it supports our activity. One way is what I've told you before about our bodies running on oxygen when we have a sense of being safe and mattering. When we have a sense of being safe and mattering and we breathe in, we're bringing in this oxygen into lungs where the bronchi open and happily receive that oxygen. And our red blood cells themselves carry more oxygen to our entire body. In this place of relaxation, the blood supply to our gut is fresh and nourishing and brings blood and nourishment to every part of our viscera and our intestines. We have this sort of total support of our internal organs that happens when we have a sense of being safe and mattering. In addition, our eyes change the way they work. When we have a sense of being safe and mattering, when our energy is flowing in what's called ventral vagal, the forwardmost channel of this vagus nerve, then our eyes focus more easily on the human face. And when we do that, our ears tighten, the muscles of the middle ear tighten to the sound range of the human voice. We become a finely tuned instrument for understanding and decoding and broadcasting the human condition. Our face, the fine muscles of our face come alive. You can see this in people's faces. You can see the lift around their eyes at the top of their cheeks, and you can see an enhanced mobility and responsiveness when they really have a sense that they belong. So the other thing that happens is that the vocal cords relax and let our voices come alive. Now, all this starts to change as soon as we're under threat. So this is what we're talking about today when we're talking about reactivity and alarm. We're talking about the body's response. When there's reactivity and alarm, our vagus nerve starts to change the way it's supporting us. When we're in a state of alarm, we want to respond to the threat. So what happens is everything shifts. All of a sudden, the bronchi of the lungs constrict a little bit, and we're breathing above the diaphragm. The blood, instead of supplying our viscera, goes out and supplies our arms or our legs to help us run away or help us fight. There's a tightening of the vocal cords. Our voice becomes less expressive. Our face loses its fine mobility. The eyes start scanning the environment for danger, and the muscles of the middle ear start listening for danger. So this, when I was telling you last time and the time before that we decode neutrality as hostility when we are in fight or flight, this is where it happens. We've lost the feed to the fine instrument of social interaction when we're under threat. We no longer have the capacity on the level of muscles and eyes and ears to hear and understand nuance. So we lose an entire swath of our humanness when we are under stress. Now,
it sounds like a lot is happening for the individual who is shifting into a place of perceived threat.
Yes.
I'm wondering, how might they be perceived themselves? Is this someone who might appear bored, detached, disengaged?
The boredom, detachment, and disengagement come one step further usually. Although sometimes people can mask their rage with boredom, disengagement. And you can tell. You can tell whether you're in the face of somebody who's masking rage or whether you're in with somebody who's lost hope. When someone has really lost hope, then they shift again to a different part of the body, the freeze channel, dorsal vagal, disengagement. Their face goes slack. Their voice loses intonation and becomes monotone. Their breathing is almost non-existent. They don't have much muscle tone. There's not a lot of get up and go. There's no creativity. There's no contribution. It is a state of suspended animation. And many of the people in our workforce in America today, and Northern Europe, in North America, in Asia, a lot of people are working from this place of disengagement, which is something that both you and I are trying to change, Rajkumari.
And so speak to the place where one feels worried or anxious, and insecure, uncertain. What place is that? And then also speak to the one who is frustrated or irritated or angry, because those are also the flight and fight stances.
Yes, yes. Well, interestingly enough, the neurophysiological difference that where we can tell what's happening, we don't do this actually, but you can tell whether you're afraid or whether you're angry by whether the skin temperature of your arms or your legs is higher. When we're angry, more blood.
Excuse me, team, I'm just going to check my leg temperature right now because I'm not quite sure if I'm angry or I'm pissed off or I want to run out of the room. So hold on a second, people. Hold on.
Yep, that's right. That's right. We can tell from that if we can't tell from what's happening inside. Sometimes you can tell. Sometimes you don't know. It's so complex, right? There's a difficult situation at work. You're partially scared. You're scared of losing your job. You're pissed off at your coworker who didn't get something turned in. You're angry at your boss who's completely unreasonable. So everything can be happening at once. It can be a very complex experience. And as you name the emotions, the body will respond. If you get to say to yourself, you can even practice in your own head. You're sitting at a meeting, a work meeting, and you notice that you can't track. Start writing emotions down on that sheet of paper in front of you and see which one kind of resonates for you. You may find that you start breathing more deeply. Your body relaxes just a little bit if you get to say, yeah, I'm angry. I loved what you said last time, Rajkumar. You called emotions these beautiful breadcrumbs. I just love that. Such a sweet quote. The breadcrumbs that lead us to the riches of what we're longing for. So in that meeting where we're experiencing all of that upset, are we needing acknowledgement? Are we needing acceptance? Are we needing a sense that, okay, what's really bad has already happened, and now let's regroup and move forward together instead of just casting blame on one another? These are the kinds of questions that can be really helpful to ask in these moments.
And if you're someone who's not really into feeling your feelings, just apparently bring a thermometer, stick it in your armpit, see what happens.
That's right. That's right.
Right? So those are your choices. Feel your feelings, bring a thermometer to a meeting.
Yeah, those are very good choices. That is right. Yeah.
There was a very fascinating study, which I'm sure you're familiar with. I was speaking to Julius Pryor about this study, who's the head of innovation at Genentech, and I was sharing with him the disruptive diversity framework because I really wanted to see if, what I was kind of cobbling together was actually making sense from a science perspective. And so we had an interesting chat. But the study that I mentioned to him is the study from 2012 at the McGill University with Moshe Saif that talks about the NR3C1 gene and how these children who had been traumatized for extended periods of time were compared to children who had not been. So these children in Group A, for example, had something as we call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and children in Group B were coded as not having PTSD. And what they found when they drew blood was that the cellular structure in the children that had PTSD had this gene called the NR3C1, and it basically was fascinating to them because it was showing up with traumatized children, and they couldn't find this gene in the non-traumatized children. What they did, whether intentionally or otherwise, I actually don't recall, maybe you do, Sarah, is as they began to literally hold the children, literally nurture the children, what they began to see over time is, and they continue to test these kids, was this gene would just vanish.
Mm.
It would just vanish. They couldn't understand this.
Mm.
And so when we kind of look at the studies around trauma, there's a beautiful study, I don't remember the date of the study and the name of the study, that shows how trauma is passed down from a cellular structure from the survivors of the Holocaust, for example. And they found that trauma lives inside the grandchildren of the survivors of the Holocaust. It's quite a fascinating thing to experience, and we've come to talk about something called epigenetics. And epigenetics is the gene expression of one's DNA. And why I'm bringing this up is because as we talk about alarm and reactivity, and as we consider and maybe reflect on the trauma that we might know of, that we ourselves have had personally, or that we know of others that have experienced or endured, to begin to invite the possibility of how to create inclusive cultures, inclusive relationships, psychological safety, places where individuals at the workplace can begin to take risks. Because not only are you aiming toward the double profit, the double bottom line, the profit and purpose, you're also moving toward crafting a greater whole person culture, someone who's able to shift their genetic expression, to begin to dissolve those levels of cortisol, to begin to allow for that synaptic transmission, for those neurotransmitters to actually, finish crossing over and really begin to have the level of safety, that serotonin, that whatever it is that allows themselves to kind of arrive at a more relaxed state, a place of, their parasympathetic, where they can really begin to feel truly as though they belong.
Yes, that's the work of Rachel Yehuda and some other epigeneticists and neuroscientists. The looking at the
Holocaust
generation effects of the Holocaust.
Oh, okay, thank you.
I love that you're bringing in the idea that our just bringing together this knowledge from Moshe Zif at McGill University, and this understanding of the power of resonant holding, of that we can continue to do this. We can continue to create structures and organizations that hold the people that are working for them and help them begin to heal. That as we create warm, responsive, supportive structures, people's epigenetic expression in the face of stress begins to change.
Absolutely. And this is not about having a hug fest, right? Because we know of all of the, legal ramifications in the workplace around that. It's really about beginning to cultivate a language that invites a different way of being. It really is about cultivating a new language, one that really invites belonging as the kind of core essence from where you strive. I talk a lot about and explain culture fit, company culture. I define it in my presentations, and I say to groups and teams and companies, I say, look, we're all striving to be the best. We're all striving to be innovative. We're all striving to be, as we say in the Valley, awesome. Ultimately, your number one product is your culture, because everything emanates from your culture. Everything you create, everything you market, every product, every design, every feature, every line of code that you write starts from your culture. And so whatever culture you have, that is the level of product you will have as well.
Stunning. As you're speaking about the language that you're using, I'm reminded of previous conversations we have had, Rajkumari, where we've both spoken about the importance of both verbal and nonverbal language in the creation of these cultures. That part of what we're doing is the way we use language, is the way we speak to each other, is the processes that we put in place. And part of what we're doing is human-to-human interaction in the nonverbal realm. What's happening with vocal tone? Is vocal tone demonstrating respect and warmth? What's happening with eye contact? Are we making eye contact with every member of the team if that's culturally appropriate? Because
I want to just jump in here. This is really important. I want to offer the audience a test, maybe even a bit of a dare. One thing that I've been doing differently for the last maybe 2 years now is anytime I'm at a restaurant, I actually will make the effort to have eye contact with the wait staff every single time, and that's correct, every single time, and I will actually take an extra second to linger that eye contact with the wait staff. The staff are so surprised. It is incredible to me that by the third or fourth time, I get incredible service wherever I go, really, because they start smiling. They start asking me, is there anything else I can get you? It's a beautiful dance that requires really no effort, just that extra second. So maybe I've given 5 to 7 extra seconds of my time over the course of my hour and a half of being at a restaurant to the wait staff. And what I get in return is exponential. It is telling this person, communicating to them without saying a word, I respect you, I honor you, I value you, I appreciate you, and I am so grateful in this moment for you.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's the first thing I want to say. And the second thing I wanted to mention was, I can't remember it now. Damn it, what was it? Let me think for a second. You were talking about, what were you talking about?
Verbal and nonverbal, vocal tone.
Yes, thank you. And the second thing I wanted to mention was I had a client a long time ago, and she had told me the story that she had noticed that her son, when he was very, very young, would hurt himself. And she would then, and I've written this story actually in my book, that when he would hurt himself, she would come and console him, and she would say, oh, what happened, and all of these things, and she would try to actually find out the story of what happened. But what she began to notice was that her tone of the questions was far more impactful than the questions themselves. So she wasn't actually getting any information about how he may have hurt himself because he was so young, but she started asking questions like that were completely irrelevant. You would have preferred that there were pigeons around you, huh? And he would say, yeah. And you would prefer that we shop at Costco, huh? And he would say, yeah. And that would build this type of resonance between the two. And within a few moments, just from the tone of connecting with him from that, I guess, limbic place, he would feel, quote unquote, healed. He would be okay. He'd get up and go play again. So just to kind of posit the curiosity of how you and the audience may begin to have more deliberate ways of leveraging your tone in the language. Same language, so you don't have to change anything about the way that you're speaking, the words that you're using, but if you just begin to alter your inflection or your tone or your pitch, and soften it just a bit. Just curious, what may happen? What might you experience?
Yeah, beautiful inquiries. Such fun to give the people who are here with us on these calls something to explore themselves, to begin to use themselves as a laboratory for exploration of the information and musings that you and I have been playing with, Rajkumari. Thank you for that. Thank you, everyone, and we'll look forward to being with you next time when we'll be talking about the left and the right hemispheres and about how the self-critical voice is born and how to begin to transform it.
Thanks, everyone. Until next time, take good care.